All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Others Receiving Votes. I am Pat Forde, as always, joined by Gene Wojciechowski and Bryan Fischer. It's our Thanksgiving week edition, so we're coming to you a couple days early. Hopefully, you're getting some time off, maybe Thursday, Friday. Spend some time with the family, maybe traveling, whatever you're doing. So we are getting you our brilliant insights and dulcet tones on Tuesday instead. Gene, for the occasion, is wearing his best British Open Argyle. It looked like you're in the road hole bunker. You're blasting out sideways today. Is that the
Said the man who's recording from a cave.
Yeah, if you're watching this, my lighting here in a Spring Hill Suites is not ideal, but I do have a Diet Dr. Pepper Fansville edition, which I think is very appropriate for our college football podcast. All right, today's show, we're going to discuss Lane Kiffin again because he makes us. He has dragged us all into his coaching love triangle as he tries to decide his future. And we'll talk about where we think he's going, what the other two schools should do next, other interesting coaching storylines, a massive rivalry week slate. This is my favorite week of the year, just with all the great rivalry games. We have the commenters commenting on comments presented by Facebook once again, as we will hear from fans about what they're thinking, and we'll tell them either they're right or wrong. Winners and steak dinners, and the one tradition you will not part with on Thanksgiving. We'll get that information from you all. But we lead with Lane because what else are we going to do? He is holding the SEC hostage. He's got decision looming, allegedly to be announced on Saturday. We'll see if the news actually holds that long, guys. Whether he's staying at Mississippi, whether he's going to LSU, whether he is going to Florida, whether he will become the ambassador to Chile, who knows? But Lane is the topic du jour this week. We talked about him last week, and if you want to hear some of our thoughts on the hiring calendar and what Lane's responsibilities are, you could listen to last week's show. This week, we're going to make a call on where he's going and when he goes. And is this an immediately after the Egg Bowl thing, or does he get to coach in the playoff? Gene, Lane part 2, where do you think this thing stands?
Well, first of all, happy Thanksgiving week to you and Bryan, and to all of our listeners and viewers. I hope you have a great turkey day. Obviously, if Florida and LSU had just waited to the end of the season, or if we had a different college football calendar, as we've spoken about in the past, maybe we wouldn't be having this exact conversation right now. But here we are. So if I'm Lane Kiffin right now, and I'm Jimmy Sexton, his agent, I have all the leverage. So if I'm them, I think I would go to LSU and I would say, I will take your job, but there's one non-negotiable. And that is I get to coach my Ole Miss team until we're eliminated. We get a coach, my staff and I get a coach as long as we want until we're eliminated in the CFP. That's assuming that they beat Mississippi State and make the CFP.
Yeah.
They have the leverage. So, and if it costs me a couple extra million, if you want to deduct that from my first year's salary, it's worth it to me. So to me, that seems like a win-win-win. LSU gets its guy. Ole Miss gets its coach for as long as they can play. Ole Miss also has a little extra time to go look for a coach. And everybody seems maybe kind of sort of happy by that kind of solution. Yes or no? Yeah. Otherwise, I think the fact that he didn't say, make a decision publicly about Ole Miss means that I guess maybe Ole Miss is still in play. LSU's in play. Florida's in play. The New York Giants, maybe they're in play. Nico Harrison's job with the Dallas Mavs as GM is in play. Who knows? But that seems like a fairly elegant solution to a really messy situation.
I like it, but go ahead, Bryan.
Well, I was going to say, Gene, this is the SEC. No fan base is going to be happy no matter what, no matter how this turns out.
True.
This is the SEC. So, and honestly, Lane is going to get all of these fan bases hating him by the end of this, given how dominating the storyline has been. I think at this point, even the Rebels players might be tired of hearing about Lane Kiffin, and then they got to see the guy every single day in the practice facilities and all that. So I don't think he necessarily owes everybody an answer. I mean, he could keep dragging this out as long as he wants, and knowing Lane Kiffin, he might do just that. He might drag this out past Selection Sunday. It's not crazy to think that he could maybe give a wink or a nod to LSU, and maybe give a wink or a nod, to Ole Miss and say, go ahead and start your search. But, in terms of a definite and final answer, we could keep having this debate. And frankly, we had a little bit of it last week in terms of, could this affect their playoff seeding? Maybe that's kind of part of the strategery, if you will, of Lane Kiffin, in terms of, hey, if I keep dragging this out, the committee cannot punish me because I haven't said one way or another what I'm going to do. Ole Miss can't punish me because I haven't given them an answer one way or another. Maybe I can hint to say, hey, Keith Carter, go ahead and start your search if you want. And go put those feelers out in terms of having a coaching search. But this has always been about Lane Kiffin. It's going to continue to be about Lane Kiffin. And no matter what, this is going to be a decision that rests with Lane Kiffin. And so with all that being said, I mean, this could keep dragging out well past this week. And I think it does add some additional layers to a pretty crazy ending to the college football season, not only with the Egg Bowl coming up, but with that college football playoff selection committee trying to debate what's going to happen with Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I in an ideal world, I would like to see exactly what Gene articulated. That Kiffin finishes the season with Mississippi whenever that season ends. That's priority one.
Right.
Priority two, you need the university to go along with that. And not get in a fit of pique if he's leaving. And I think if you pull back, who in the world would blame Lane Kiffin for going from Mississippi to LSU? And that's that. I will put in my prediction. That's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to go to LSU. I don't know. There's an excellent chance I'm wrong. I don't think any of us knows for sure. I do think that if the world believes we're going to get a 10 a.m. Saturday announcement from Keith Carter about this, I don't think it's going to hold that long. I would anticipate the Egg Bowl is going to end about 3:30 on Friday, and sometime shortly thereafter, we're going to find out what Kiffin's plans are, one way or the other. But I think the most important thing is to finish the season with the players that you bought in with and the fans bought in with, and everybody said, let's make this season as good as we possibly can. And you don't do that by leaving for another job. And Ole Miss doesn't achieve that by saying, get out. We don't want you. We're going to have Mississippi man coach Mississippi. It sounded great when Bo Schembechler did it, and he walked into the most fortunate thing of all time when Steve Fischer won a national championship in 7 games as a head coach. But that would be, to me, the best way to handle this if college football could handle that and having that much patience to let something play out. Everybody gets in such a freaking panic about, what about the portal? What about the roster? What about this? What about that? Sometimes you got to prioritize what you're actually doing right now as opposed to next year. And that's where I would like to see this thing go.
I'm with you. I think it's LSU, obviously. And again, who knows? But I respectfully disagree with you, Bryan. I don't think this thing is going to linger. They've already publicly come out with the edict saying we're going to have an answer one way or the other, either from us or from Lane, right after the Egg Bowl. So the idea of this maybe floating along based on all reasonable logic that you said, I don't see it happening. And I'm with Pat. There's no way this thing holds. And if Ole Miss says, no, we don't want you to coach if you're going to LSU, then that's on the AD and the school president.
Right.
And no more of this, bashing of Kiffin, because he's done his duty in a way, or at least he's tried to make the best of a bad situation for Ole Miss if he leaves.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ole Miss is the one that, frankly, has created or at least poured some gasoline on this fire. Now, Lane is certainly not blameless. I'm not saying anything like that, but Ole Miss has said, with these deadlines and with these ultimatums and with the leaking of the stories of these ultimatums and stories, they've caused a little bit more friction than there probably should be in this situation. That they could have dragged this out. They could have go ahead and start their search, and said, all right, well, we're going to conduct a coaching search in the background, like all good ADs tend to do anyway in these type of scenarios. And you know what? They've added to the pressure of this. They are the ones that are adding to the fact that they are pushing Lane Kiffin to make a decision one way or another and make sure it's public. And they didn't have to do that. They could have said, all right, Lane, just, me, you and Keith, we're just tell us what you're going to do so that we can move forward. But they're trying to do this publicly because they're trying to appeal to some segment of their fan base that is going to get angry and mad about things because this is the SEC. And I think they've just added that extra bit of gasoline to an already combustible situation that they could have at least avoided until after the playoff selection committee made their choices. This could have been pushed back a little bit further than what it already has been, but they wanted to do this the week of the Egg Bowl, which is already a crazy rivalry as is, and add just turn the heat up a couple of notches. And I think that's on Ole Miss. It's not necessarily on Lane. It is on Ole Miss in this scenario.
So where do you think he's going, Bryan?
I'm with you guys. I think it's LSU, and I think that's been the kind of hints and indications we've gotten the last, I don't want to say past week, but certainly the last couple of days. But and I think that's probably more a reflection on the fact that if Lane were staying, we would know about it. I think there would be the indications. There would not be these ultimatums. There would not be these discussions. There would at least be an indication that all right, he's going to turn around and stay. And you know what? Maybe he sure can be. He can play everybody like a fiddle and say, hey, you know what? I'm actually staying. Here's my new 10-year deal with Ole Miss. I'm going to be the coach here for life. They will have to carry me out with a pine box or something like that if he wants to make some references there historically. But I think all indications are right now that Florida's moving on with their search and he's going to LSU.
The rumored price tag here or potential annual salary is $13 million. Are we really going to pay Lane Kiffin that? Any thoughts, anybody?
Well, they're paying Bill Belichick 10.1. They're paying Kirby 13 plus.
Kirby's won some championships.
I'm with you. Lincoln Riley 11.5.
Yeah, and he
Mike Elko 11. Sarkisian 11. Dan Lanning 10.4. Not all those guys have won national championships. Supply and demand, baby.
Yeah, it is supply and demand, and right now, boy, it's great to be wanted by not just 2 schools but 3 schools. So
yeah, that's Pat Forde money.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody you named has been to the playoff, and Lane Kiffin has not. Maybe this year he's going to go. Should he still be the coach? I think, unless they actually blow this game, and let's talk about that. What if? Let's go ahead and just hit the nuclear button here. What if Ole Miss loses the Egg Bowl? What is the reaction? Bryan, you got any thoughts?
Oh, I don't even know at this point. I mean, I think it'd be great news if you're Miami sitting out there, and you can convincingly win on that final weekend against Pitt. And you could say, hey, they're dealing with a whole lot of stuff right now. And they just lost to a team that just barely scraped their way to 6-6. What about us? That would certainly take the committee in terms of their biggest decision in terms of this Notre Dame, Miami head-to-head, that sort of thing. They could throw that out and say, all right, well, you know what, Ole Miss, you know what, in terms of your wins, you beat Oklahoma, sure. Oklahoma is already in the playoff, but you know what, we're going to create that separation between Ole Miss and Oklahoma, so we don't have to worry about that head-to-head. And we can say, all right, it's Notre Dame and Miami in there. And so maybe we just throw a different at-large in there that they put them well behind the rest of the field. And they can say, well, we just didn't know, the frame of mind of Ole Miss at this point. That's not the same team that we saw these last couple of weeks because they were dealing with this issue with their head coach, who is their play caller, as we mentioned. It's not only going to impact their seeding, maybe it impacts them being in because there is a glut of 10-2 teams that are going to be out there for the playoff committee to decide who's in at large. And if Ole Miss, their lasting impression is to losing to a soon-to-be 6-6 team in Mississippi State, which, yes, they've been improved, but the lack of SEC wins, I think, is definitely notable there for the Bulldogs. So if they were to pull this upset, I think Ole Miss would be going into Selection Sunday a little bit nervous.
I think they'd be going into Selection Sunday a lot nervous. And I think the only people who would be really happy about this is LSU. But I don't see it happening. I just don't. I mean, Jeff Lebby has done a great job at Mississippi State. They're obviously improved, but they've won they've lost 6 of the last 7 games. Do I have that right? They're 92nd in scoring defense. Ole Miss is 13th in scoring offense. I'm not real good at math, but that doesn't seem like a good combination to me. But regardless, if Kiffin was being wooed by these other schools or not, let's just say none of this was going on, and this was still the calculus of the CFP equation. If Ole Miss lost this game, they'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, this would be a bad loss, and as Bryan alluded to, there is a glut of 10-2 teams out there, but even more so, just I think the fan base would be so ticked off because you've taken this great season and you've ended it in this bizarre soap opera. And if it then leads to losing the rivalry game to your 5-6 rival, ooh. I think there's an easy way to avoid that. A way that Alabama fans once implored Lane Kiffin to coach offense. Run the damn ball, Lane. Mississippi State's run defense is terrible. They're last in the SEC in that area. Ole Miss has a good rushing attack. They like to run it a lot. So pound the rock, run the clock, get out of Starkville with a win, and then you're in the playoff, and that alleviates at least part of the tension here. One thing I forgot to ask you guys, because I'm a bad host and don't read the rundown well, which of course I wrote.
You can't see in that room.
That's it. It's here in the Batcave, it's like I'm guessing what actually is going on with this podcast, which probably is obvious. No, all right. So if we all think Lane is going to LSU, what do Florida and Mississippi do?
Go ahead, Bryan.
That's a good question. I think for Ole Miss and for Florida, you're definitely saying, all right, John Summerall, come on down. I think he's certainly the belle of the ball in the SEC in terms of he's going to be in the mix there at Auburn. He's going to have certainly some contact there at Florida. I do think the Gators are at least in a good position because they've got a candidate out there that they know would take the job in Jed Fish. That would be a pretty decent sell. He's an alum. He's had success there at Washington, had success at Arizona, had been in the NFL, been in college football. He's had success at a lot of places. He's a guy that I think you could still sell to that fan base saying, hey, he's one of us. He will do a good job here. And he will go toe to toe with some of those teams that you're going to see in the SEC. So I think Florida's at least in a little bit better position than I think Ole Miss. Ole Miss with the Auburn job out there, that's the difficult part for the Rebels is they're not only competing against some of the other SEC teams, but they're competing one that's kind of right in their same tax bracket in terms of what they're going to be able to offer in terms of pay, in terms of the spending on the roster, in terms of location, in terms of all that. So, and you probably would go in terms of Auburn having more success historically. So that's going to be the big problem for the Rebels. But I think it probably is going to start with your phone call to John Summerall, see what he has to do. Maybe you move on to Alex Golish there at USF, another guy in kind of that Kiffin mold who's had success in a Group of 5 program in the state of Florida and knows the SEC well in terms of that footprint. Had a lot of success there at Tennessee, helping Josh Heupel build up the Vols. So I think those would probably be your top 2 names, like they are for a lot of programs right now, trying to find a coach.
What do you think, Pat?
I think certainly Florida's in a better position here because they've been at a search longer. And I think they've probably felt for the last at least 4 or 5 days, maybe 6, that Kiffin is not going to be their guy. So they're turning to other alternatives there. From what I heard, there was some curiosity or interest in Kenny Dillingham, who I think would be fantastic. There's one issue there, and this is where you get into booster politics and ego and things like that. Well, he's a Mike Norvell guy. He was at Florida State and he coached under Mike Norvell, and we all think Mike Norvell's terrible because he coaches our rival. Don't let that stop you from getting a really good coach. I think that would be silly. So I think Kenny Dillingham would be a great choice there. Mississippi, yes, if you could get John Sumrall, great. I think Auburn's trying to, again, as Bryan alluded to, lay down foundation there. I love Alex Golish as well. If you can get either of those two guys, the problem with John Sumrall may well be in a position too of saying, I got a team in a playoff.
There you go. I was waiting for somebody to say that.
Right? It's not just a Lane Kiffin thing, and you might need to finish the season with your team in the playoffs. So
I think it'd be more understandable though for a group of 5 coach like John Sumrall to say, I am going to take this other job, but I'm still going to be coaching my playoff team. You know, I think that's a lot more understandable than the situation that Lane Kiffin is in. What if it were John Sumrall, we're going to probably see it with Eric Morris too. There at North Texas, you know, if they end up being the American champion. So James Madison, even with Bob Chesney. So like all those people in that group of 5 bid, they're going to be in the same scenario. All 3 of those coaches that are in consideration are going to be in the same scenario as Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I don't think it's any different than what Lane Kiffin is going through. If Sumrall got that job and decided to leave before the playoffs, I don't see why he should catch any less or more grief than Lane Kiffin is catching right now. And I don't think it's right on either side, to be honest with you. But I think I think Dillingham would be a terrific choice at any of these openings. That's how much I think he's a plug-in coach kind of candidate. And I hate to do this to you, Pat, but I think Eli Drinkwitz would be a really nice option at Florida. And I was listening to Kirk Herbstreit doing the Tennessee-Florida game, and he was saying, you know, Florida, don't worry about winning the press conference. You know, just go out and hire a really good coach. But with Drinkwitz, you would win the press conference and you would win a lot of games with that guy. He's a really good coach. And there's a little bit of Spurrier in him, which I think would appeal to that constituency. And Ole Miss, I have no problem with Sumrall, but you know, just asking for a friend of mine who lives in Oxford currently, you know, again, why would that be any different if he left Tulane to go to Ole Miss? It's a situation that coaches have to face, and it's just not limited to Lane Kiffin right now.
I agree. I think that if your team's in the playoff, you coach the playoff. You asked to coach the playoff.
Yeah.
You know, there's no doubt about it. It doesn't matter. And especially like that group of 5 slot, I mean, maybe you're competing with how many 60 other schools to get one bid. So the chances of getting there are difficult, even at the higher end of the group of 5 schools. So I would not look kindly upon a coach that said, I'm out of here. I gotta go make this power conference money right now. And I think Drinkwitz very much could be in play at Florida, no doubt about it. In other coaching carousel news, Mike Norvell joined the Survivor Brigade at Florida State. They announced that they are keeping him. Perhaps just simply pointing at their bank account and saying, we don't have $60 million to throw away here.
Were you surprised by that?
No, I was not. This is what I expected. For that very reason. I think if they wanted to get rid of him and they had the money to do it, they would have done it during the season when it looked like they were about ready to. So didn't surprise me. Were you guys surprised at all?
I certainly wasn't. Yeah. You know, I think Michael Alford, their AD, really wanted this to work out. You know, I think they really did not want to spend that money, number one, and then number two, they want Mike Norvell to work out. You know, I think they've developed a nice working relationship there in Tallahassee. They've certainly seen what he can do at the high end in terms of leading a team to an undefeated record in the regular season. So you know there's a good coach in there at some point. It's just, you know, the problem has been Mike Norvell in terms of the roster. You know, I don't think that he is recruited as well as he should at a place like Florida State in terms of the high school talent. probably overly reliant on the transfer portal when he probably shouldn't be there at a place like Florida State. So if Mike Norvell can make those necessary changes, all right, maybe you can kind of push things out. But I think it also says a lot about the standards at Florida State nowadays, where it is acceptable to go 6-6, where that, 10 years ago, that was not the case. 15 years ago, that was certainly not the case. Going back to the Bobby Bowden days, certainly not the case. That would have been considered, light your hair on fire type of scenario for Florida State, but at least it's acceptable nowadays, which I think that's part of the problem for the ACC in general too. If you're looking at this scenario from an outsider's perspective, you are counting on as a league, counting on Florida State to be good. Even with Mike Norvell coming back, even with some continuity there on the coaching staff, I'm not sure Florida State's like markedly better unless they just land every transfer portal hit that they can get in the portal coming up. This is not going to be a vastly improved team from this year to next year. You're not expecting them to make some massive leap. So I think that's part of the problem that Florida State is. They're just pushing this decision off until next year. Like they're not, they're pushing the real decision off until next year, because I don't think this is has all the hallmarks and the makings of a team that's going to go from 6-6 to 11-1 next year.
There is no way 6-6 is acceptable to anyone there. What is acceptable is we're not going to pay that buyout money right now. So we'll suck it up and we'll give this another try and hope that the football gods look more kindly on us and we don't have footballs, punts landing on the helmets of our players and bouncing back to the NC State punter, who, by the way, made a hellacious grab on that, or we don't have a ball going off the shoulder pad chest plate of Squirrel White on a punt. I mean, those are just things where the gods are against you. So, but I do not think in any form or fashion 6-6 is acceptable at FSU. They're upset, they're angry, but there's just nothing they can do about it right now.
Yeah, that's thank you, Alabama, for forcing your hand, I guess, to re-up or to increase the salary for Mike Norvell. It is interesting to me. It humbling, I would suggest, for Florida State, which in 2023, as they were going undefeated, basically portrayed themselves as far too good for the ACC. And, if we're going to consort with these people, we're going to need more money. We're going to need more sucking up from this league if they're going to actually think that we're a member of this, And since then, yeah. Since then, 7-17, if you include the 61-3 bowl game loss to Georgia. So perhaps a little forced humility in Tallahassee. Couple other coaching change things of note. Justin Wilcox got whacked at Cal. He was a pretty average coach at a place where average isn't even that easy to do. But after 9 years, it was enough. And Chip Kelly got fired by the Raiders, which puts him back on the market. And we won't discuss that here, but keep an eye on Chip, either as a head coach or as an offensive coordinator. Because I thought the work he did in the playoff last year, calling plays for Ohio State, was about as good a segment of 4 games as I've seen a guy coach. I just thought his play calling, and he's working in concert with Ryan Day. So you got 2 elite minds there, and elite talent for sure. But if I'm sitting out there, first of all, if I'm like Ohio or Oregon State or Cal, I want to talk to them about being the head coach. And if I'm some of these other places, I want to talk to them about being my offensive coordinator.
I would question, though, if Chip wants to be a head coach again.
He might not.
He was so just the difference in seeing him towards his end of the UCLA tenure, just on his face, like you just tell. From the pressures of being a head coach to just the freedom he had as an offensive coordinator. Like, I mean, it was night and day. I mean, you Pat, you certainly saw him up close in person during that playoff run. Like he was having the time of his life, coaching there at Ohio State and just calling plays, just doing the game planning, doing a little recruiting.
I was surprised he left.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he loves living in Manhattan Beach. If you're Lincoln Riley and you're talking about a guy who helped elevate Ryan Day from having a Michigan problem and having being on the hot seat with your fan base to a national championship coach, maybe you give him a call and say, help me elevate this program at USC. You get to live in the place where you like to live. You get to come to the office, get to coach ball. You can take some of my offensive coordinator duties away from me. Maybe that's an option for Chip.
Location's the only part of that makes sense to me. I don't see Lincoln Riley bringing in the former UCLA coach. There's a lot of ego there. Ryan Day had a relationship with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly coached Ryan Day. So I think that would be a much easier relationship.
And offense hasn't been the problem at USC.
Right.
And you'd basically be kneecapping the guy that you hired to run your offense. I could actually see Andrew Luck and Stanford going, hold on a second here. Though I am hearing that Stanford might be zeroing in on its guy now, that process is nearing a conclusion. But maybe now with Kelly out there, that changes it a little bit. But Bryan, you made a great point. Who knows if he even wants back in? Right. I mean, he left that really cozy arrangement at Ohio State, went to the NFL. You don't know with Chip. He's a different kind of dude, but he's a hell of a coach. And if you could get him on your staff, either as a head coach or a coordinator, your team would be better for it.
No doubt. I think it's fascinating to have him out there in any capacity. And again, yeah, he's 61 years old. He may be like, I'm done, but he loves ball and he loves calling ball plays. So we'll see. All right. We got to talk about the games this week because they're awesome. Just a great week. They're all the rivalry games that impact the playoff, and then the rivalry games that don't impact anything, but are still, I think, just fun to watch and listen to how much the fans care, and just to see the uniforms on the field, all that sort of thing. So let's quickly hit on the stakes for some of these. We're going to pick several of them later on, but we've got to start in Ann Arbor, Ohio State, Michigan. I got pepper sprayed last year. I was there on the field for that lovely commingling of players. It was a spirited endeavor, let me tell you. One of the most strange, bizarre, ridiculous things I've ever seen and been part of. Pepper spray doesn't taste very good. That's my review there. But hopefully we don't have that involved in the big house this year. My question for you guys: is there less weighing on Ryan Day to end this streak against Michigan now that he's proved that this game is not make or break? And it is, again, this is an optional win because you can go to the playoff even if you lose this game. So is there less at stake here? I say yes, but I think that is very hard to get that emotionally through the heads of your fan base, because they hate Michigan so much and you've lost to them 4 straight times. And I think the Connor Stallions thing amped it up tremendously, and the bitter feelings there, just that we've got to beat Michigan, but you really don't have to beat Michigan. And I think you've had a great season and you're a chance in position to win a national championship again, no matter what happens on Saturday. Gene, you think they're buying that?
Yeah, what a lively sense of humor you have, Pat. Are you sure that's just Diet Dr. Pepper you're drinking this morning?
That's all it is.
Let me introduce you to the Ohio State fan base, which, politely speaking, is not the most patient and understanding fan base in the country. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Washington beats Oregon, Ohio State's not playing in the Big Ten championship. How do you think that will go over? Maybe there'll be some faction of
last year.
Right. I know. Maybe there'll be some faction of the Ohio State fan base that says we're good with that. But does that drop Ohio State out of a guaranteed bye situation? I don't know. But to lose 5 in a row to Michigan would not go over well. I don't care however you want to try to justify it. Those people want to beat Michigan, and 5 in a row would not go over well. That'd be like tofu turkey on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ryan Day's predecessor has set the standard there in Columbus in terms of the importance of this rivalry, and that's certainly added to the pressure that Ryan Day faces every time this weekend rolls around. You know, in not only in Columbus, but like that is a desperate fan base to where option number one, option number two, and option number three is beat Michigan. Like that is the stacking order. Forget the national titles, which that is also part of the standard there in Columbus. But it's number one, you got to beat Michigan. And you know what? If he loses this one, I mean, I can only imagine the debate there in Columbus. Yes, there are all those goals out there. Yes, they would still be one of the favorites to win the national title. But like, you want to talk about having a Michigan problem? He would have a Michigan problem for sure if they were to lose this one on Saturday. Because the past two Michigan teams, if you're talking about like, it's one thing to have that Michigan team that went on to win a national title beat you. Okay, there maybe you can kind of set that to a side. It's one thing to have a decent Michigan team, but the past two Michigan teams are not world beaters. And we've seen that on the field. Like this is a team that has struggled offensively. And you know, this is not the standard that they've set defensively either. You know, they've allowed a lot more points than I think you probably would have expected given some of the veterans on that defense. So this is not your same old Michigan team either that Ohio State has to beat. And so I think that kind of ramps things up in terms of it's one thing if it were a good Michigan team, the past two Michigan editions, if you will, of the Wolverines. That I think that almost adds a little another layer of complexity in terms of this rivalry if they were to end up losing.
I will be the voice of calm and reason and perspective for all those Ohio State fans that I'm sure they would love to hear should they
Yes.
lose this game. Texas A&M, Texas, also a rather spirited rivalry, even if they didn't play for a period of time. Got back together last year, big time game. Bad game, really, but a lot at stake in this year's game. Obviously, a lot at stake as well, with Texas A&M trying to finish an undefeated season, go to the SEC championship, go to the playoff. Texas trying to even just get back into the playoff picture. So, Bryan, you're going to be there for that one. It was huge having the resumption last year. Is this one even bigger, or is that an overstatement?
I don't know if you can quite match the intensity that being in College Station, especially in the pregame lead up there was last year. But it's nice to have this rivalry back consistently and to have the chirping on both sides this weekend in particular. I mean, it really kind of started a couple weeks ago, but you know, as everybody's pointing towards this game in particular, but you know, it's great to have the sniping and the talking back and forth between burnt orange and the maroon and I like that this game has stakes because it's been 15 years since Texas A&M won this one, 5,482 days. And if you don't think they know that in College Station, you would be crazy because it has been driving them nuts that they've not been able to get a pretty vulnerable Texas. Even last year, I mean, that was a game that Texas A&M could have won. You know, like they could have won that to go to Atlanta. They've got it all in front of them here. They have the better team. They have the better team going into this game. I've been marking it down as a loss for a couple of months now, just given all the rivalry dynamics and the fact that this is not a talentless Texas, but you know, I think this is in A&M's grasp to win this one, go to Atlanta, make your first SEC championship game. And that would almost make it a little bit sweeter because it has been 15 years since they've won in Austin. And it would be very interesting to see what would happen should the Aggies fall. But I think this is a game that is there for the taking for them.
If this were a microwavable meal, you'd still be hitting the setting on high. I'm with you. It probably doesn't have the same intensity as last year's game, but it's still going to be fairly hot there. And Sark would love nothing than to end A&M's undefeated season. Manning have a great game. That would shut up the critics for a long, long time, I assume. And it would keep the faintest of faintest hopes alive for Texas as far as the CFP is concerned. So I still think Texas has a lot to play for. And playing it there in Austin, I think it's going to be a hype situation. A lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I am very excited for that game. I'm glad Bryan's going to be there. I'm going to be in the big house the next day, but those two and the Egg Bowl, of course, the Egg Bowl drama top my rivalry watch list, but never, ever far behind is the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
Especially when they play in Jordan-Hare Stadium and stuff happens. I was there for the kick six. I was there when Bryce Young led a comeback to desperately beat a bad Auburn team in 2021. I think we all watched the 4th and 31 pass in 2023 to win that game. There's been a lot of stuff that happens. This is never an easy game for Alabama when they go there to play on the Plains. But Gino, how much pressure do you think is on Kalen DeBoer to win the game?
Not much. I mean, I think we can all agree that the Bama fans are a pretty understanding bunch.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to that game.
Mm-hmm.
If Bama loses, they're out of the SEC championship game, might be out of the CFP at that point. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think DeBoer would be fine. Everybody would be good with that.
So, yes, to continue that, out of the SEC championship, out of the CFP, is he out of a job? That may be overstating it, but he'd be better off to win.
Yes.
Well, and they might, if he does end up losing, they might pull the moving truck up and say, pick your job wherever you want to go, and we'll help you pack. And that is the pressure in this game. I mean, it's not just Nick Saban that feels it. It is every Alabama coach. They feel that pressure because you want to talk about bragging rights 365. As much as there is that in-state in Texas A&M, it is intense in that state of Alabama in terms of who wins that Iron Bowl. And you're right, Pat. I mean, just weird things happen when this game is in Jordan-Hare. I mean, I don't think either side have won by more than a touchdown in like a decade or something like that when this game is in Auburn. And so I think for as bad as Auburn is, and they're fighting to make a bowl game, as crazy as their offense has been, they still got a really good defense that gives them a chance in this one. I think it's going to be one of the more fascinating games because Alabama, let's face it, they have not looked that great these last couple of weeks. They've been, struggled to run the ball. Ty Simpson has turned the ball over, certainly in that Oklahoma game, a lot more than you would have liked. So this is not a world beater Alabama coming in there. And you add the rivalry element in there. You had the voodoo hex that they got there at Jordan-Hare. This is going to be a very fascinating game there on Saturday.
All right. Pacific Northwest, I think an underrated rivalry. Oregon, Washington. In the 40-yard dash, I gave this a 3 out of 5 on the hate scale. And I was mocked by fans of both teams who think that I have severely underrated
the
hatred between the Ducks and the Huskies. I went to one of them. Everybody seemed pretty pleasant. I don't know. I was at Husky Stadium, Michael Penix against Bo Nix. It was a relatively happy crowd.
Sure.
Parking wasn't easy, but that's a whole other matter.
You didn't get pepper sprayed.
I did not. See, right?
Well,
let's just make that the baseline. I did not get pepper sprayed.
Yes.
And nobody was poisoning another team's trees. That's the other baseline.
That's true.
All right. But anyway, the Ducks trying to lock down a playoff home game. I think they're in the playoff, but you want to make sure you're playing another game in Autzen Stadium. You win this one, but Washington's great at home. 25 out of 26 they've won at Husky Stadium. So, Bryan, what's your thoughts here?
Well, I think it is interesting. And Pat, I mean, this is an intense rivalry. And maybe it's just the social media area that's amped things up, but they do not like each other. They're in the Pacific Northwest. They're like, as much as they like everything else going on in the world, there is some intense hatred between these two fan bases. And it's had playoff implications, the last couple of years. It's had conference title implications these last couple of years. And they've been compelling, thrilling games for the most part too. I mean, this is they split their last 5 if you go back a decade in terms of how this has kind of bounced back and forth. And usually there's teams that would go on a run. Things are much more evenly matched nowadays. And frankly, when you got a quarterback like Damon Williams Jr., you're going to be in games if you're Washington. And yes, they've had a setback, at Wisconsin that was a little bit head scratching, but they have the opportunity against a beat up Oregon team. I think that was the one thing that struck me in that USC game, man. They were losing, I think, 3 offensive linemen. They were rotating a lot of guys on defense because they were losing a lot of those one-on-one balls on the outside in the secondary in particular. Now, you're going to do that against some of those USC wide receivers, but that would give you some hope if you're a Washington fan or if you're on that Washington coaching staff, saying, hey, we can make enough plays. We can make this a game if we execute properly and we don't commit penalties and we don't do silly mistakes and turn the ball over. They can make this a game, especially in Husky Stadium, which is one of the toughest places in the country to play. When all that sound is just kind of reverberating around that stadium, I mean, it can get intense, it can get tough to play, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Washington makes this a game in the fourth quarter.
It's a 6.5 point spread the last time I looked. But Bryan, for all the reasons that maybe you have some doubts about Oregon, are all the reasons why I'm all on board with Oregon. I love their resiliency. I absolutely love their toughness and their physicality, which is what I really think wore down USC in that game. Their ability to run the ball, their ability to be physical. On the road under Dan Lanning, Oregon 17-2. They have the longest win streak on the road right now, 11 games. So going to Husky Stadium, while difficult, a formidable task against a formidable team, I think Oregon's a pretty formidable team. And I just don't think they're going to be freaked out by walking into that place and facing that team.
Yeah, I'm impressed by what Oregon has been the last 2 years, with the inexplicable exception of being just trucked in the Rose Bowl by Ohio State. Part of it, actually, it is partly explicable because Ohio State was that good, but still, I was shocked that Oregon didn't show up better then. One more rivalry game, you guys, one that you're interested in real quick. I'm just going to throw out Vandy, Tennessee, which really isn't a rivalry game, as Gene knows. I mean, it's not been competitive. It's not been close. There are no Vandy fans per se. But they've come out of the woodwork this year. We've heard from them, and good for them. They've got a great team. They're 9-2. You go win in Neyland Stadium, and maybe you've got a 10-2 resume that argues you for inclusion in the playoff. You probably need some help elsewhere, but I'm intrigued by that game, and I want to see Pavia swagger in there in front of 100,000 people and say, hey, get a load of me. This is a Diego Pavia special here, and he has played incredibly well the last 3 games, over 1,400 yards total offense. So, rivalry, that's the one I want to see.
I'm going to be at that game, and I'm with you. I think it's going to be a hellacious game. But just a small reminder, last year in Nashville, Tennessee held Pavia to 8 of 17 for 104 yards, 1 TD, 1 int, 45 yards rushing, and they won for the 6th time in a row. But I will be the first to tell you, this isn't the same Tennessee defense as last year. They're, tied for 83rd in scoring defense. And it's certainly not the same Pavia. He's hellacious to watch. So I think Tennessee's going to have everything that it wants and more in that game.
I will go off the radar a little bit, and Pat, you're
Sun Belt.
I wish maybe later on we'll go bring up the Sun Belt, but Pat, you mentioned kind of like the hatred scale. Arizona,
Yeah.
Arizona State on a scale of hate. Like, that is one of the more underrated rivalries, I think, in the country, just in terms of the passion those two fan bases have. And Friday night, it should be a ranked versus ranked matchup. It's not, but it should be. The winner gets 9 wins, which is big for both of those programs. Really a testament to the jobs that both coaches have done this season. Brent Brennan, they wanted to run him out of town after last year. Well, you might end up, if you beat your rival, getting to 9 wins and having quite the turnaround year. Kenny Dillingham, with what he's been able to do with the injuries on that roster, to be able to even be in position to potentially make the Big 12 title game. Yes, they need some help, but they could still backdoor their way into the Big 12 title game. He's done an excellent job. And I would also stay on the West Coast and do a secondary shout out to USC UCLA, because we know that's going to be the best uniform matchup of the weekend with those powder blues and the Cardinal and Gold.
Good call.
Yes, very good call there, and a good call. They still call it the Territorial Cup there, and back when the Arizona was a territory before it even became a state. They get after it in that one. That's for sure. Those fan bases do not like each other. So, all right. Now our segment here, and we thank our sponsors, presented by Facebook. Commenters commenting on comments. It's very meta, you might say, huh?
Look at you, a little turn of the phrase.
Yeah. Producer Kent culled some of the best comments from actual users from the Facebook team pages. So you can go check those out if you would like. We're going to run through them. You give me your quick reactions here. Melissa, I adored this one from Melissa. If there's a 6-way tie in the ACC, let's have the coaches fight it out in a steel cage match for the auto bid. Which coach would leave victorious? Gene, who's the biggest brawler in the
Well, I think you got to go with Manny Diaz, don't you?
ACC?
I would say I would pay money, hard-earned SI.com podcast money to watch Mario Cristobal and Brent Key go at it.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be very close, but I think Brent Key would come out of there hand raised.
See, I would disagree a little bit there, and I do think this is a pretty feisty group overall. I mean, Pat Narduzzi, he's going to pull something, like he's a scrappy guy. Jake Dickert, Wisconsin boy, he's probably got that farm strength in him. I think Rhett Lashley, maybe he's got a shot. He might be the best, in terms of physical nature. He might be the best in shape out of all these guys. But the answer is clearly Mario. I think he has like a judo or karate background that he had back in the day. He was an offensive lineman on those national title teams for the U. An all old offensive lineman who still gets in there and starts hitting the sled at practice. Like to me, it's going to be a Mario Brent Key final, and I see Mario taking home the title.
It is a final between those two. I agree with you guys there, and that is a lineman on lineman battle.
Yeah,
and Mario would walk in looking the maddest. Like, all right, like he's just there to brawl. Let's go right now. But don't underestimate Brent Key. I was in his office earlier this year. He's pretty well put together. He swims, and so he's got a little cardiovascular that I think he could just wear down, Mario. If this turns into if it's not just a ground and pound 2-minute thing, if it's a 3-minute, 4-minute battle, I think Brent Key comes out of that with the win.
It's always about the swimming with you.
See, why not? Why not?
Sure.
When you can reference swimming, you always do.
Absolutely.
But see, this is the kind of content you come to the podcast for, the steel cage match in ACC coaches. But otherwise, we touched on this briefly. Anthony wants to know, will 10-2 Vandy be left out of the CFP? Bryan, you've spent a lot of time going over CFP scenarios for SI.com. What do you think here?
Unfortunately, I think they would if they were 10-2 and kind of chalk holds elsewhere. I think the key is going to be Oklahoma and LSU on Saturday. If Oklahoma were to take a loss, then that does kind of open the door. But Vandy's behind Miami, I think, in the pecking order. I don't think the committee wants to leave Miami out at the expense of Notre Dame. So I think that would kind of color the Commodores there in terms of kind of being in the back of the line in terms of the pecking order, which is a shame because to win 10 games at Vandy, to do everything they've really been asked, in terms of the season itself, and to be left out of the playoff, getting 10 wins in the SEC, that's a tough pill to swallow if you're Clark Lee and Vandy at the end of the day. Yes, you'll have a great year, and you'll have Diego Pavia probably going to New York if that's the case, but it would be a tough blow there for the dozens of Vandy fans out there that would say, hey, we did everything possible, and we're 10-2, and we end up getting left out of the playoff, and probably not even the first team out of the playoff in terms of the field either.
Yeah, I'd be sad for them because it would be absolutely the greatest season in school history, and it still wouldn't get you into the playoff. But you'll take 10-2 and be still pretty happy down there. Patty asks, is Lincoln Riley just Clay Helton 2.0? Why is he getting a free pass? Patty, let me direct you to SI.com in the column I wrote Saturday after USC lost to Oregon. He's not getting a free pass, at least not here, not from me. I said that he's been an extension of Clay Helton. Their records are identical at this point. The program has pointed itself back up after last year's just dismal kind of crash. That was the bottom, I think, and they've started to turn it around. But he got a 10-year, $110 million contract. they're not like, oh, we're close, has been what he keeps saying. They did not hire him and go 4 years into this for we're close. In a 12-team playoff, USC needs to make a playoff every now and again. So for now, I think it's been disappointing.
Well, and you're not the only one who is applying some pressure to him. Bill Plaschke, the longtime columnist of the LA Times, his lead after that loss to Oregon was another big game, another big stink.
Yikes. Okay.
I'm not going to be so hard on Lincoln Riley. I mean, all your points are well taken. I don't disagree with any of them, but they are 8-3, and yes, they're not going to make the playoff. But if they beat UCLA, win a bowl game, they've won 10 games. They have the number one incoming recruiting class for 2026. The guy still knows how to coach quarterbacks, knows how to coach offenses. I think the arrow is pointed in the right direction, maybe just not pointed as quickly in that direction that USC fans want. They're an impatient bunch also, but I do think Riley is a really good head coach, but he has been a bit disappointing as far as timetables are concerned.
Thank you, Bill Plaschke, for joining me on the stabbing side. I like a little company. Thank you. Drew, it's our last one for commenters commenting on comments. Drew asks, could we see interim coach Charlie Weis Jr. at Mississippi hosting Notre Dame in the playoff? That would be amazing. Yes, Drew, it would be amazing. Unfortunately, I don't think Charlie Weis would probably be the interim coach. I think it'd be Joe Judge if Lane Kiffin were to leave and not coach the playoff. But even just having Charlie Weis on the staff as the quote-unquote offensive coordinator, and now he really would be the offensive coordinator if Lane left, because he would have to actually call the plays. Hosting Notre Dame, that would be something, and take us back 20 years to when people thought Charlie Weis Sr. looked like a phenomenal hire. That lasted for about 5 games at Notre Dame. But bring it on. That would be just another storyline. There's going to be plenty of them when we get to the playoff. Any input there, guys, before we get to winners and steak dinners?
Well, I think the only thing
Golding.
Yeah, there's
I'm sorry, you could have Pete Golding, the former Bama defensive coordinator, if they were matched up against Bama in the first round.
Yes, you
That'd
could.
be interesting.
The only thing I would add is it'd probably be Ole Miss at Notre Dame, given the committee would probably dock the Rebels that home game if Lane Kiffin were no longer there. So it'd actually be Charlie Weis Jr. going back to South Bend and playing under the Watch Live touchdown Jesus, or Pete Golding potentially on the road there at Alabama. So
I met Charlie Weis
Jr. commenting about something if the committee dings Ole Miss if Kiffin leaves.
That would we'd have some comments on that. Yes, we would. I met Charlie Weis Jr. about probably 20 years ago, 19 years ago, whatever it would be, in Charlie Weis Sr.'s office when he was like 12. He was in there hanging out when I went in to interview Charlie one time. Interesting to see his career get to where it is. All right, winners and steak dinners. Gene, I'll give Gene credit. He did not obnoxiously bludgeon us in the group text about going 5-0 last week. Congratulations. So you've had an 0-5, you've had a 5-0. You're back in the mix now with the Bear pick, especially the standings right now. Bryan 35-31, Gene 35-32. I'm 32-34. Moving on. This week, excellent games to pick. We've talked about them some. We don't have to belabor the games very much here, but we got to make some picks. Ohio State giving 9.5 at Michigan. I'm covering that one. I think the Michigan thing is, to a degree, out of Ryan Day's head. As I said, I think he can coach this game with a little less pressure on him. And I think he saw last year that completely obsessing over we have to win the running game was the wrong approach when you've got an elite passing game. And I think he's just going to approach this game in a more sane fashion. And I think they're going to win, and they're going to cover the 9.5. Give me Ohio State.
Do we know what the wide receiver situation is there?
We don't.
Yet?
We don't. They have not said about Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate. I'd be shocked if Jeremiah Smith. There's been no indication that his injury is serious. I think that was as much precautionary as anything. So
he did go on Caleb Downs' podcast and say he would be good to go. So I think he's kind of given the indications that he's going to play in this one.
Those games have been close, which makes you think that 9.5 is pretty tempting. But I'm with you, Pat. I'm taking Ohio State. They have the number one defense in the country for a reason. I think it's just going to be tough for Michigan to put points up.
Yeah, and I think the Wolverines' defense a little more pliable, and we kind of saw that against Maryland a little bit last week as well. So I think Ohio State is able to score. I'm not convinced that Michigan can do that. I think 10 points might be the max that they're able to put up on the board, even at the Big House. So give me Ohio State and lock it up to cover that 9.5.
All right, Texas A&M, Texas. Aggies giving 2.5. This is we have a lot of home dogs in play here in rivalry settings, so this gets really interesting. But Bryan, you're covering that game. Who are you picking?
For like 9 plus months, I went back at the early part of the season, picked every game, and I've been thinking for a long time. This was the opportunity for Texas A&M to come in. They would have some momentum, and Texas would just end up finding a way to win this one. And I've thought that way for a long time, but I've also thought these last couple of weeks, and maybe it was seeing that LSU game that for Texas A&M. This is a different Aggies team. This is a different Mike Elko team. He's pushed the right buttons. It does not seem like this is the same old Texas A&M anymore. They've got some dudes that are making plays right now. I think Marcel Reed has improved as the year has gone on, and I think they go into Austin and they not only cover the 2.5, but they get the win.
I'm with you. I'll take A&M. I think it'll be close for a long time, but I think that A&M can win by 3. So everything that Bryan said.
Yeah, I'm with you guys there. I'm taking the Aggies, and I think they have better weapons offensively than Texas does. And what Marcel Reed showed me in the comeback against South Carolina was that he could put bad plays behind him, because the first half he was god awful, and the second half he was fantastic when it mattered. And I think that's a springboard sort of situation that'll help him here. All right, Iron Bowl. Alabama laying 6.5 on the Plains. Gino, your thoughts?
Well, Auburn isn't going to lack for emotion. I mean, they're going to honor the 40-year anniversary of Bo Jackson winning the Heisman. That's going to be a big deal. Greg Carr is getting honored for making it into the Hall of Fame. The place is going to be jacked. We've all covered that game. We know what it can be like there. And as you've said many times, Pat, strange things happen. Auburn's run defense is really good, which is never a good thing for Alabama, which can't run the ball anyway. This game has been historically, at least recent years, fairly close. I will take Auburn and take the points.
I was kind of trending that way for a long time because, my most recent memory was just seeing Oklahoma get 212 yards and still go into Tuscaloosa and get a win. But I think this is Alabama. I think they find a way. I think they know what's at stake. I think they've been saving stuff up for this game. I think, yes, they cannot run the ball to save their life, but I think the defense is just good enough against an Auburn offense, which who knows who's going to be the quarterback there. We'll see. Obviously we saw the freshmen last week in their FCS game against Mercer, but there were some struggles there in the first half for Auburn offensively. I think Alabama ends up covering the number. As crazy as this game is, and as close as this series has been, I still think Alabama at this point, they find a way. Maybe it's late, maybe it's a late cover, but I think they do end up not only winning but sending themselves to Atlanta with a cover.
I think it's a field goal game, so I'm gonna take Auburn to cover the number. Ty Simpson is he's becoming a little more mistake prone as the season has gone on. Look, just so in command for quite a while, but I think maybe his confidence is taking a little bit of a ding as the SEC season is unraveled here. So I'm going to say that Alabama's offense is just suspect enough to keep Auburn close, and that game goes down to the wire. All right, an ACC game of note. Miami giving 6.5 at Pitt. These are two teams that sometimes you just don't know what they're going to do, but we've got to try to figure out what they're going to do. Bryan, what are you doing there?
I don't know. I think this is a fascinating game in the ACC, and you want to think if Miami wants to get into the playoff, they're going to have some style points, and I think this is interesting because it's going to be 31 degrees there at kickoff at Acrisure Stadium. We know Miami going north in the conditions, maybe that affects them a little bit early on, but I think at the end of the day, they got too many playmakers for Pitt's defense to cover on the outside with Malachi Toney and that wide receiving core. Plus, I think Corey Helderman's defense, I think they're a lot tighter, certainly, than what we saw in that Georgia Tech game. And there was some nervy moments there for Pitt in that game against Georgia Tech as well. I think Miami's able to make enough plays to cover this by a touchdown. So give me Miami reluctantly as another road favorite to cover the 6.5.
Miami needed style points against Virginia Tech, and they had to wait till the very, very, very end to really sort of be able to do it. Now I think they're going to a tougher place against a tougher team. That 6.5 points just feels funny to me. It's like they want you to take Miami because they think they can cover by 7. I like Pitt. I like Pitt at home. And you're right, Bryan. Those Miami wide receivers are going to be a problem for Pitt, but I think Pitt has some things that are going to be a problem for Miami. I'll take Pitt and I'll take the points.
Yeah, I'm going with Eugene there, and I just
no.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
You really don't want me on your side here.
No,
but
you really don't.
I am. So I just, again, yes, the unpredictability of this game, weather factors. I expect Pitt to play a really good game, and we'll see if Miami can answer that. All right, lock of the week. Who has one?
Bryan, I always wait for you, buddy.
Well, as much as I love going to the Sun Belt and some of the other off the radars, I want to go to the land of Pat Forde's youth. Air Force and Colorado State, a lost season for both teams. They play.
Look at him; he's going to weep.
They play in the aptly named but very uncreative Ram Falcon Trophy. I mean, come on, guys, we got to figure out something. Name it after some general or something that has Colorado State ties or something. We got to find something else about the Cadets. Though they have never lost at the Canvas, Colorado State's new stadium. In their home field. The Rams have an interim coaching staff. They just suspended their quarterback and one of their starting offensive linemen for spitting. And Troy Calhoun is 14-3 in this rivalry. Give me Air Force. As bad a season as they had, they cover the 1.5 at rival Colorado State, and they at least end the year on a high note.
Those are two bad teams there, so you take your chances, but I appreciate the nod. The I-25 battle, we'll call it that. I guess we got to do something better than Ram Falcon. Gino, you got
Pat?
All right. I'm going to take Iowa giving 5 at Nebraska Friday at noon in what should be, a classic 32-degree slog, possible snow flurries there. But Nebraska, without Dylan Raiola, has not played well, and this is just the setting where Iowa does what it does. And, they're going to score a special teams touchdown. They're going to get a safety. They're going to definitely cover the 5 points there. So give me the Hawkeyes to cover.
I'm going to go out west. We talked a little bit about USC earlier. I'm going to take USC minus the 21.5 points against UCLA. Great. If it was a uniform game, it would be a pick'em game. Unfortunately, it's not. Nika Iamaleava has been having neck spasms. They're not positive he's going to be able to play or how effective he is going to be if he plays. Bruins have lost 4 in a row, have been outscored 96-24 in the last 2 games. Last 2 games. So that's not good. And I just think USC is going to try to make a statement here and take out some of their frustration from the Oregon game on UCLA at home.
Makes sense to me. UCLA, I think, is put it in park for the year. Last thing here. It is Thanksgiving week. I love Thanksgiving week. I love every single tradition that goes along with it. And I could bore you guys to tears talking about all of them. But I'm curious about you guys, your favorite tradition you have, and I'm gonna give you mine just because I love telling this story. It's actually been discontinued for health and safety reasons. But we had a family Turkey Bowl football game that never failed to produce hilarity and calamity because we were all bad football players, old, out of shape, and somebody would get hurt, and then feelings would get hurt, and there was anger, and something always happened. But the best one was our last one. This ended it. We're playing in the park up in our neighborhood, right? We've got like, I don't know, 12, 14 people playing. And my brother-in-law, absolute prince of a fella, his younger brother. So my brother-in-law's brother, who played some college football, an exceptional athlete. He comes and he's the classic, like, I'm here to win guy, right? Tragically competitive. And he brings his sons who are good athletes, and they're wearing cleats, which is like, okay, that's no, you don't need to bring cleats to this. But Greg, the brother-in-law's brother in question, is playing quarterback, as he always does. And for some reason, my 77-year-old father-in-law decides he wants to play. 77, diabetic. We're like, no, Joe, you know what? No. How about, no, I'm playing. So Joe gets out there and we're like, he can't cover anybody. He's just going to have to be the rush the passer, right? He's our pass rusher. There are no blockers. It's your classic 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi thing. So apparently Joe Miller at 77 was not counting all 3 Mississippis before he was rushing the passer. But for some reason, this seemed to Greg, who's the quarterback, can't get away from the 77-year-old. And so, like, Joe is rushing, and Greg swim moves him, takes him down, breaks his glasses, and cuts his cheek. Right then and there, the Turkey Bowl ended. We were done at that point when the 77-year-old gets injured rushing the passer. But I did love the game and love the fact that we played every year. Do you all have a cherished Thanksgiving tradition, either of you?
Well, mine is basically not to have an angioplasty because I just park myself at that table or on the couch. It's a day for Lululemon stretch pants.
There you go.
I think my only real tradition is my wife, Cheryl, who's unbelievably fabulous Thanksgiving Day cook. She's able to produce and create a pile of dishes and pots and pans that you cannot believe. And my job, and I'm happy to do it in light of all of her hard work, is to wash the dishes, the pots and pans. So that's my tradition. It doesn't quite go to the level as Bradley Cooper in Wedding Crashers in the touch football game, like you're the 77-year-old. But yeah, I'm more just, laying the couch kind of guy and happy to do it.
Well, you're a good husband there, cleaning the dishes. You're going to make the rest of us look bad.
And I like wearing Argyle during
yeah, there you go.
Week. So
we're actually deleting this segment because you're going to make Bryan and I look bad because I can't say I'm a great dish doer.
Oh, that's always what I was used to do. At the end of the day, at the end of the dinner, me and my grandpa, we'd be doing the dishes. So, really? I guess that would be part of the tradition, but a lot of it would be.
Bryan, you're a good guy.
It'd just be calendar dependent.
Pat, not so much.
Not so much.
Appreciate that. A lot of it's just calendar dependent in the state of Texas. You obviously have the Cowboys game. I've gone to that for years upon years. They're living in Dallas for as many years, depending on the matchups. If that was a good game, Texas A&M, depending on whether that was on Thanksgiving or maybe it was a Black Friday or that weekend. So like that, there would always be a lot of those trips. So it'd be a little, calendar dependent. And then certainly late in the later years, if you're still playing the playoffs, you'd have a playoff game. So you probably have to stay home. So there's a lot of calendar dependent tradition, I guess you could say, in my household.
I've never actually been to a game on Thanksgiving Day, so that would be a whole different experience. I was tempted actually I almost covered an egg bowl or something, but I think my family would have run me out if I'd actually said no, I can't be home on Thanksgiving. I would have run myself out, frankly. But All right, that's our show, everybody. Hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. If you're still listening this long, we appreciate it. And have a excellent weekend. Going to be great football. We'll be back next week to talk about it all. Talk to you later.